Hi, hello, and welcome back to Everso. I'm Ever, and this will be the continuation of a fic titled The Room It Echoes Clear with Words We Choose Not to Hear. I finally say that I am not okay. Summary. I'm sorry. Chapter 2. Apollo slouched on the couch, trying to stop fidgeting, but he just couldn't. Leto had insisted he sit down and wouldn't let him get up and help her. She twirled around the living room in frenzy, adjusting various things that all looked equally fine after she messed with them, just as they did before. Without anything to do, or even a conversation to focus on, the atmosphere was one giant panini press, and he was the unfortunate sandwich in question. Leto didn't seem to notice. He knew she had said that he wasn't supposed to get up and help her, but there was nothing to do. She had told him to relax, but he didn't know how to do that. Sure, he could just put on a theatrical performance of relaxation, but he didn't really want to here. He wanted to be honest with his mother, in ways he wasn't before, and so he didn't want to pretend he wasn't awkwardly waiting to be helpful, because he didn't know what else to do. He passed it on, as not awkward of a smile as he could scavenge up, when she thrilled over his shoulder something about having his favorite already mostly prepared, just needed to finish it and should be right there, and he could decide if he wanted to eat at dinner table or on the couch. The couch felt far too casual for eating with his mother, so he rose and slowly walked to the dining room, hesitating before he picked up the same spot he always did. It was the same chair and table as the last time he was there. It hadn't changed in decades, but it felt different, and he didn't like it. Apollo stared out of the window, watching the leaves slowly drift down. He wondered what Meg was doing. She was happily hosting Emmy, Joe, Leo, Georgie, and Calypso at Aethelus for the duration of fall break. Apollo, quite horribly, wanted to be there. He could see it in his mind's eye. He would be chopping carrots, of course, and he'd be teasingly worried for Emmy for that one time he'd said Sally Jackson was the better cook. But he knew it was all in good fun, and he would have an ever-present bubble like laughter in his chest, even if he tried to defend himself. He'd help her bring the salad to the table, where Leo would be sitting down, the bread straight out of the oven, foregoing the mitts, and Calypso would be pouring water or lemonade into the cups, depending on what people had asked for. Joe would bring out a heavy pumpkin soup, and Meg would slouch in to sit next to Georgie after the two put down the plates, bowls, and utensils. He could almost smell it, and he could feel it, the warmth of home that went oh so far beyond temperature. He was cold, as he sat in his mother's house, watching her serve him. Oh, It was a pot roast. His chest felt tight, and he told himself it was just the guilt of thinking of Aethelus as home and being disappointed when he came back to himself. That was the only reason. He wasn't bothered at all that he was being served pot roast. He didn't care that pot roast was Artemis' favorite, not his, and Leto had said that she was making his favorite. He didn't care that he admitted to Leto that he hated pot roast, that he ever told her a couple of times, and she had completely forgotten. Again, how unfortunate, and how unfair was it of him to expect her to remember what food he loved and hated. Immortal beings like them had far too many things to remember, so of course tiny details that didn't mean anything fell to the wayside. Apollo was the worst son in the history of sons, for coming back from a fantasy about his family friends and being disappointed he was with his mother and not them, and then instantly getting upset at her. Letta was talking then, and he nodded and smiled and then stared down at his bowl. Why was he trying to hold back tears? One meal was nothing to cry at. What was wrong with him? He looked back up, and she was already digging in. He needed to eat, too, and his stomach shrunk at the thought. There are demigods out there now starving, he told himself fiercely. He wanted to be better. Start with not throwing a fit over a perfectly good food from a mother made you. Maybe appreciate that there is food to eat at all. Don't you remember what it was like when you had nothing at all? Don't you remember your trials? Don't you remember before then? Don't you remember how hard mother once had to fight to feed you in Artemis before Olympus stole you away from her loving embrace? Eat it. Disgusted with himself for needing to give himself a pep talk before he could eat it, and being so incredibly grateful that Letta hadn't noticed a thing and was still talking, Apollo carefully stabbed a carrot with his fork and ate it. Not his favorite, but he didn't hate the carrots. That was fine. He would just eat the carrots first and see how much of the rest he could stomach. The gravy was fatty and salty, and it coated his tongue like a film. All he could taste was the gravy, and he wanted to gag. He took a sip of the water. What do you think? I know you always loved pot roast, but I couldn't quite remember the recipe. I hope this is still as good as you remember. Letta babbled. Apollo looked up at her and forced a smile. It probably looked stilted and barely polite, but she didn't seem to notice. It's delicious, Mother. You really are a good cook, he managed. She lit up, and he told himself it was worth the feeling of slowly dying as he put another carrot in his mouth and slowly chewed, refusing to grimace at the taste. There was a few beats of silence, and he tilted his head. Well? Well, what? Apollo asked. Letta rolled her eyes. Aren't you going to tell me what's been going on in your little corner of the world? Oh, right. Buying time himself here, he crammed the carrot in his mouth. So much had happened, but what did he want to tell Letta? Let's see, he said after he chewed and swallowed. There I was, wearing the ugliest outfit in the world, having fallen into a dumpster of all things, if you could believe that. He let a light-hearted indignation fill his tone. And the first thing that happened is I get mugged. Not that I even had much worth to be mugged for, but I was so grateful when it was interrupted by the most annoying traffic light I have ever seen. He gave her a grin. The most annoying traffic light, mind you, but my dearest friend, he continued. She is practically a little sister, and let me tell you, this one, No. I don't want to hear about your trials. Why would I want to hear about that? Letta stared at him, aghast, and he couldn't quite help but wailed. She didn't want to hear about his trial? She didn't want to make sure he was okay, to hear about what happened to him, Could it be that she hadn't really cared to watch the recordings, rather than being sickened by the monetization of his suffering like Apollo had assumed? No. He was making horrible assumptions. He needed to stop and get over himself. She would never not care about him. He was her baby boy. He needed to stop assuming the worst of her. He knew what she meant, right? Then, what do you want to hear about? He asked her awkwardly after a moment where she seemed to be waiting for him to say something. Little half at him, and he could tell she was getting annoyed. How are you setting back in, Apollo? With that tone, and using his name instead of a term of endearment, Apollo knew he was getting himself in trouble if he wasn't careful for the next little bit. I want to hear about how your latest show is going, and how are your dearest friends. You haven't said a word about Calliope. I heard she just had a new son. Were they alright while you were gone? How are Thermos doing? You hadn't talked to him. Oh, he hadn't talked to Maya in, no, it surely been 50 years by now. Apollo didn't know how Hermes or Calliope were doing, and he certainly didn't count the Muses as his dearest friends, and kind of never had. These days, they were more his co-workers than anything else, if he was being entirely honest. Oh, Apollo stumbled over his words. I decided to visit you before I visited them, he said honestly. I missed you, Mother, he said with a sweet smile, and she melted. With that, he knew he was, at least temporarily, forgiven for not having the information she wanted. Oh, alrighty then, I can forgive you for visiting me first, but just because I missed you more. She laughed, and the sound was light and airy. Impossible, he told her, smiling wider. In any case, I am settling just fine. I almost forgot how to create clothes for myself when I woke up, but other than that, things have been more natural than a mortal's urge to breathe. That lie had spilled out of his mouth and left an uncomfortable tingling feeling that certainly helped him sit up straight and proper and keep track of his facials. Lies really did feel like getting struck with lightning, but that was just the price he had to pay. Honestly, it tended to just serve as a reminder, helping him control himself and by proxy the situation. Thankfully, the sparkling sensation in his bones had him looking up, so he caught the disturbed expression Letta made. Why was she disturbed? What had he said? Oh. Obviously, the forgetting how to create clothes things was only because I was disoriented, he added hastily. I'd just woken up for a nice vision about one of my sons, he lied, the electricity buzzing beneath his skin like a crowd of agitated bees. I remembered soon enough, of course, he promised. No, he didn't. What kind of god had to practice the most basic of divine abilities, much less his own? He ate another carrot, while she visibly relaxed, her face becoming smooth and pleasant once more. Oh, had me worried there for a second, you scoundrel, she teased, lightly swatting at him. A good son wouldn't make his mother worry so. It was just teasing. He knew it was. But it was also true. She was right. And the clenching in his gut all but confirmed it. He didn't need to feel for the truth past the static lie still cackling under his skin to tell. He spread a chunk of potato and ate it, internally grimacing at the salty exterior and then the unfortunate texture of the far too bland interior. How's it been with you? He asked once he managed to swallow. Ida smiled. Oh, it's been lovely. It's quite peaceful here, you know. You should visit more often. I imagine the calm would do you a world of good, if only you could slow down. Leto gave a tinkling laugh. I think I would like that, Apollo said softly. But then he imagined finding peace. That was not what he thought of. He should probably work on that too. Leto went on a tangent-filled description of how the sunrise looked from the window, and Apollo finished the carrots and potatoes and was left with nothing but the onions and meat. He didn't much care for taking a large bite of an onion, so he left them floating in the salty gravy. Dubiously, Apollo prodded at one of the larger chunks with his fork. A piece flaked off at the touch, glistening in the light with the fat clinging to it. It was food. It was good food which his mother had made for him and thought he loved, and she wanted him to eat it. He hated denying his mother anything, but that meat, he wasn't sure he could bring himself to eat it, even for her. Unkindly, but with utmost sincerity, he decided he'd rather try a sip or two of the tri-glowed lizard soup with a lump of salt-saturated fat. Apollo pried off as much of the fat as he could and carefully cut a small strand of the meat itself and placed it in his mouth. If he had needed a reminder as to why he hated this meal in particular, the nasty texture itself gave him every reason he needed to justify to himself his hatred, much less the taste. Apollo hated it. He hated it. He hated it, and hated it, and hated it. He scooped another bite, chewed, and swallowed, humming in acknowledgement at something Leto said. All his energy went to not gagging as he forced his way through as much of the meat as he could stomach before he set the fork down with an exaggerated sigh of satisfaction. "Oh, Mother, that was delicious," he told her, and this time he barely even noticed the stinging lie, his urge to scrape his itching tongue taking precedence by far. She beamed at him. "Oh, I'm so glad. I'm sure it's been some time since you had a nice home-cooked meal. I'm just grateful I was already in the midst of making you one when you came," she told him. He chose not to mention the fact that he had dinner with the Jackson Bluffs family the night before. "Now that you've finished, darling, you should go upstairs and get some rest. Your preferred guest room is ready, and the shower is fully equipped, and you can summon whatever else you need." Leto joyfully spread herself a bit of meat, and somehow looked at it as if she enjoyed the bite. "Thank you, Mother," he said gratefully, rising and picking up his bowl and draining a glass of water. "Of course, sweetie," she waved at him. "Now, then, just to let you know, I've let all my friends know about, Now, then, just to let you know, I already let all my friends know already about the party. Was there anyone you wanted to make sure to invite?" He froze. What on earth did she mean? The party? The party? She made a dismissive gesture with her hand. "The one celebrating your return, of course. I hear half of Florida nymphs are planning to show up, so try not to break too many hearts." What? No, seriously, what? Ignoring the last bit, he said, "Mom, wait, I don't want the party." He was trying to control his tone, but he knew he still sounded confused and upset. I just wanted to spend time with you. Mom, I really don't want the party," he tried to explain when she rolled her eyes. "Oh, hush you. You won't be hosting, so there is hardly anything to worry about now, is there? I'll handle everything, so you don't bother lifting a finger. Just show up and let a mother fuss over her famous son and celebrate his return to grace. Yes?" Something about the phrasing of that rubbed him wrong, but he just checked it off. Apollo stood there for a moment, because he didn't know what to do. He never did when it came to Leto, but he did not want to think about that right then. He had tried to tell her no, had tried to explain himself, but she just had ignored him completely and decided for him that she was going to host a party in his name. He felt hot as he nodded, unable to bring himself to try choking out anything but a beyond "Yes, mother." He gave her as much of a smile as he could manage when she seemed satisfied, and then he fled the scene as quickly as he could without letting on that he was running away. Yes, he, the great god Apollo, was fleeing from his dear mother. He didn't have the energy to try and process what that meant. Could he have tried harder? There must have been a way, somehow, to let her know how much he didn't want this party. He clearly had to have failed in his explanation, hadn't been clear enough. He explicitly said he didn't want the party, that she had decided to throw without asking him, and she had brushed him off. Could he have been any clearer than that? Should he just had said no? No, he couldn't have done that. He couldn't have said no like that, not to her. No matter how many millennia went by, he would always feel small next to her. He was her baby boy. He didn't dare upset her. He loved her and she loved him. He was too afraid to say no, even though she'd never do anything to him. What was he afraid? How could he be afraid of her? Because it was fear, though he didn't want to admit it, as much as it was love that it pained him to say no to someone he loved that deeply. But how can you love someone who you don't even know and who doesn't even try to know you? Apollo found himself with his hand on the door handle of his bathroom. He twisted it and let himself in, and then sank to the floor as soon as he had the door locked. A party. He was so tired. He was so tired. The thought of talking to his mother the next day was almost more than he could stomach, much less the idea of hosting a party, never mind that Leto had tried to claim. Apollo wouldn't know what to do at a party he wasn't at least half hosting, or at least entertaining at. And all the things he knew how to do seemed impossible. He was just so tired. He tried to mentally prepare for tomorrow, but all he could see in his mind's eye were tittling nymphs who had laughed at him as he had wet his pants in fear during his murder trials, jeered at Jason's death, and thought that the humiliation of his trials meant that he was their social equal now. His obsessive fans had always felt entitled to him, but without his veneer of perfection. Apollo trembled on the floor, overwhelmed at the thought of all the possessive touches from unfamiliar hands that always seemed to set his skin to crawling, and all of the people he needed to be perfect for, needed to pretend he'd learned nothing on his trials for, or they'd eat him alive, He stumbled into the shower and somehow managed to turn on the water. there, covered by the sound of the water, just in case Leto came by. He cried. In the notes, me writing what lies feel like to Apollo. The light that spilled out of his mouth was an uncomfortable tingle that certainly helped him stay up straighter and proper to keep track of his facials. Me. Uncomfortable tingle? Ugh. Yeah, that kind of makes him joned up, like it shocks him. Lying feels like Zeus bolts. Not the master bolt though, so Apollo wouldn't even flinch. I would say I'm sorry, but I'm not. And Jesus, that's it for this chapter. There is a little bit of the life of the author and notes that I think I will just keep not read. If you want to read them, feel free to click in the description for the fic. Also drop a kudo to the author. I think that's one of the greatest fics I read from the Trials of Apollo fandom, so don't be shy. And I thank you for listening, and I hope that you have a great day or night, and bye bye.